Welcome in to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. I spoke with Matthew Haynes this week, and he said that their family-owned business is getting a lot of calls right now about one topic: ants. And uncles. No, just ants. Those little devils are out in force already. Depending on your need, Southeast Termite and Pest Control can provide one-time, quarterly, or monthly ant treatments for you. They're spectacular with mosquitoes. They do a great job with ants as well. I'm glad I haven't seen one of those in my house yet, but I have a friend who has. I told him, call Southeast Termite and Pest Control. There's your website. Check it out for yourself. All right. Lots of basketball news this week, including something I thought was coming as soon as I heard the Jordan Bone announcement we talked about on the show.
Yep.
When he first put out that video, it did not sound like – there were people that tried to spin it as, well, he's just testing the waters. That did not sound like a testing the waters, that first video thing. It sounded like, I'm gone. And he put out a video this past week, or a statement this week saying, indeed, I am staying in the draft. Thoughts on his decision to stay in the draft? I mean, if he gets drafted, then you have to say, good move. If he doesn't, is it necessarily a bad move?
You know, go ahead.
Look, from all accounts at the combine, he had a stellar combine. He's one of the ones
In terms
who
of the drills.
Yes.
He wasn't great in the scrimmages, but he was very good in the
And
drills.
a 42.5 vertical. I mean, he's 21 years old. And with the NBA moving towards a younger, I think his decision was made months ago. I don't think there's been any fence sitting. And I think there's a very good chance he could be drafted in the second round. And Phoenix seems to love him.
Watch the Celtics.
Yeah.
He got 4 picks, and Danny Ainge is very unconventional. But he's got speed and agility. Somebody's going to look at him and say, I can turn you into something.
Well, you're starting to see him pop up in some of those 2-round mock drafts now, where that wasn't the case before the combine. So I think he's helped himself. And honestly, even if he doesn't get drafted, I think he wants to be a professional basketball player. So even if it doesn't happen in the NBA, I think he's going to stay and not take advantage of the opportunity he has to come back.
But I do think he's the one out of between him and Grant Williams, he's the one that could have helped himself by coming back, I think.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes,
the talent
agreed.
level at Tennessee may drop off a little bit, so maybe that doesn't help him. But since he did so well in all those drills, and since he did improve his stock, how much does he improve it if he comes back for another year? And I think he's the one guy that might have been able to do that more so than Grant Williams.
Okay. You want some on this one, or can I start the next question?
Yeah, I would just say he could have his draft stock could have risen coming back. Developing, though, I think he can do that as a college or a pro player. He's probably a G League guy next year, but he'll have an NBA shot.
All right. We've already talked this summer about the fact it's going to be a rebuilding year. It's terrible timing. We all know that because of the raise that Rick Barnes got, because of the fact that he flirted with UCLA and was honest about it, and that ticked some people off. So having a rebuilding year, you're going to have people grumbling. They're not going to like the fact we're paying you $5 million for this. You're going to hear it, or $4.5 million. But a couple of things happened this week. One happened this week. One I noticed this week. I think that makes next season kind of tough, even tougher. First of all, Memphis, who mouthed it off about you last year, and just, when Tennessee beat Memphis, we're all sitting here thinking, boy, there's this series flipped. Tennessee now owns the state, and they're playing catch-up. Okay, now Memphis is popping up in the top 10. They had the number 1 signing class in the country, but I've seen them in the top 10 in 2 different polls this week. Okay, that could be tricky if Rick Barnes loses to Memphis. The bigger thing I think was a bad deal. Tennessee in basketball always plays two games, home and home, against Kentucky, against Vanderbilt, against South Carolina, and then there's 2 rotating teams. This year the rotation gave them Arkansas and Bruce Pearl twice. So he's going to play Auburn and Bruce Pearl twice, and last year was the first time in a while that the Pearl people climbed out of their crypt, Pearl. If he struggles against Pearl this year, I hope we're going to be surprised by him and what he pulled, like he did 2 years ago. Nobody thought he'd be able to do what he did. Maybe they do that this year. But on paper, this just seems like the worst possible rebuild year you could find. Thoughts on playing Pearl twice? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, fans are already probably drafting up some tweets.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Save.
And make sure they have the Sports Animals phone number saved so they can call theirs important too. But I mean, it's realistically going to be a big transition year for Tennessee basketball, which I think people should recognize is the case. You should know that going in, but it can become frustrating if fans do have higher expectations and they see people like Memphis, like Auburn or others in the SEC start to climb up.
But am I the only one that sees the Pearl thing as a negative, playing them twice? I mean, hey, if you beat them twice, then that'll shut some people up. But and here's the thing. Auburn has some losses on their roster too, but they're still picked top 20 in most polls. I saw where Tennessee, Seth Davis still had Tennessee 32 or 33 in his poll, but Auburn's still supposed to be a top 20 team. So am I wrong? Am I just being Mr. Negative and looking at it and saying that could be tricky having to play? I wouldn't want to play wouldn't want to play Pearl twice this year if I were Barnes.
Nope, I agree.
No, I think it is something to look at because you saw those fans, as you mentioned, John, come out and show their support for Bruce Pearl coming off of last year, much less if Tennessee's struggling this year and Rick Barnes is making all that money. I do think that it's going to give them an extra opportunity to voice their displeasure and their pro Bruce Pearl way.
Yeah, playing Auburn twice puts a little hot sauce in the chili, doesn't it?
Yeah, there you go.
That's what it does.
But chance to split, though, if you go there once, you're probably losing on the road, right? So, I mean, there's a chance where you can come out of it even, Steven.
Even, yeah. Well, in that case, you want to win the second one. You hope it's scheduled road and then home.
That's right.
Because you don't want to lose the last one. That's all anybody will remember. And then finally, I'll mention this. Tennessee added another transfer this week to Uroš Plavšić, who I pronounced that right last week. How about that?
Very good.
But Uroš won't be alone, the 7-footer from Arizona State. This week, guard Victor Bailey of Oregon said he's coming to Tennessee, but unless he gets a waiver, he's going to sit out this season anyway and won't be available for 2 years. Averaged 7 points a game this year at Oregon, but he didn't really play much the back half of the season. It's hard to really talk very much about a guy I've never seen play who may not even play this year.
That's what I would have a problem with. If I'm bringing somebody in, I'm thinking we need all hands on deck.
Get a grad transfer who
Yeah,
helps
I'm
now.
going to get somebody that can help me next season for sure.
And also doesn't take up a slot in the next recruiting class.
Yes.
Because you're running out of slots now. In terms of scholarships, if everyone lives up to their commitments, I think you're getting tight on numbers.
Right, you have one
the
player
following
committed
year.
for next year, Corey Walker, very highly touted player, but only 2 seniors. So they're in on big-time players in next year's class. There can always be some roster flexibility,
Certainly.
for numbers if you need.
I think you may need to operate on the assumption these days in college basketball the guys are going to leave, so you kind of prepare for it.
And you've run some people off. Right. Speaking of that, more retirements from the UT football team. We'll talk about the attrition on the roster and the toll it's taken. Going back.